Okay, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking the psychology of people who absolutely hate asking for help. It's a really fascinating look at why asking for a simple favor can sometimes feel like this massive, glaring weakness. We're going to look at why your incredible strength, that fierce independence you pride yourself on, might actually just be a hidden survival mechanism.
So be honest with yourself for a second. Would you rather spend 5 hours struggling completely alone with a task, or just ask someone for 5 minutes of help to get it done? Look, if you're the go-to person everyone else leans on, but your throat literally tightens up the second you need support, this is probably going to hit pretty close to home. You might call yourself independent or self-reliant, but psychology actually suggests there is something way deeper happening beneath the surface here.
And we're not just talking about some quirky personality trait. We're talking about a psychological state called hyper-independence. Now, for most of us, seeking help is just a natural social instinct. But for this specific group, depending on someone else triggers very real feelings of guilt, anxiety, or even danger. Your brain has essentially been wired by these invisible laws to view asking for help as a literal threat to your safety. Crazy, right?
Okay, Section 1. Growing up too fast. Let's move to the root of this and examine the childhood origins and developmental psychology behind our actions today.
If I don't do it, it won't get done. How many times have you said that? This stems from something called survival independence. Developmental psychology shows us that kids who grow up without consistent emotional or physical support learn very early on that they just cannot rely on others. When a kid realizes the adults around them aren't going to meet their needs, well, they just stop asking. They start doing. So if you're constantly repeating that phrase, you're likely running on an old childhood script that forced you to be strong way before you were ever allowed to just be a kid.
And the absolutely crucial point here is understanding the parentification trap. This happens when a child is forced to take on serious adult responsibilities or, constantly manage the complex emotions of their parents before they are developmentally ready for it. Because you had to be the mature one solving problems for the whole family, you fundamentally learned that your own feelings and needs, those must always come dead last. It is endlessly fascinating how this manifests when we grow up, because externally, you present as this incredibly capable, totally composed adult. People look at you and think, wow, they have it all together. But internally, actually needing someone feels like this forbidden role reversal. You've been the caretaker for so long that being taken care of feels like you're breaking a fundamental law of the universe.
All right, moving right along to Section 2, the burden of need. This brings us to the deep-seated guilt associated with attachment psychology and the very concept of needing other people.
So while normal need is a totally natural, healthy human instinct, for the hyper-independent person, there is what we call the guilt of needing. Attachment psychology shows that they carry this core, unshakable belief that being taken care of means they are actively burdening someone else. You know the type. Maybe you're constantly apologizing for just wanting a little support, or you feel this intense, crushing guilt if someone goes out of their way for you. And that's because you grew up associating the concept of needing directly with bothering.
And as a direct result of all that guilt, you end up adopting a minimizing strategy. You essentially shrink yourself to stay invisible so you don't disrupt the peace. You try to take up as little space as physically possible in other people's lives. No asking for favors, no voicing your struggles, all just to avoid making waves. Somehow you've convinced yourself that being completely low maintenance is the absolute only way to be loved.
Which brings us to Section 3, the high trust threshold and the fear of disappointment. Let's look at why some people find regular social support not just unnecessary, but genuinely draining to their brains.
Psychologists call this low social dependency. People with this trait do not rely on public validation to feel good about themselves at all. In fact, and this is wild to see mapped out, their brains burn far more energy dealing with the noise of a collaborative effort. We're talking about 75% of their mental bandwidth being eaten up by group dynamics compared to just 25% when they solve the problem entirely alone. So it is literally easier and less physically draining for them to isolate and do the work themselves than to navigate the social minefield of asking for help.
But beyond just energy management, this acts as a heavy protection cycle. Look, once trust is broken in your past through betrayal or neglect, your brain becomes hyper-selective. It sets up this ironclad defensive sequence where you decide, you know what, I'm simply never going to ask for help again. And that is strictly to ensure that no one ever has the opportunity to let you down.
And I think this perfectly captures the ultimate trade-off hyper-independent people make every single day.
You consciously choose the physical and mental exhaustion of doing everything yourself. Why? Because to your nervous system, that exhaustion actually feels significantly safer than the emotional pain of someone failing to show up for you. Simply put, you would rather be dead tired than disappointed.
Finally, Section 4, Permission to Rest and the Path to Healing. Let's look at the way forward, because, spoiler alert, psychology definitely does not call you broken.
If anything we've covered today resonated with you, please know this. You are not broken. Not even a little bit. Your nervous system simply adapted to intense pressure early in life. You learned responsibility long before you were ever given a baseline sense of safety. Healing from this doesn't mean you're becoming weak or, losing your edge. It just means recognizing those old invisible laws and learning that you are, finally, allowed to rest.
The absolutely crucial step here is rewriting that old childhood script and finally accepting one really powerful truth. Needing people is a human right, not a burden. It's literally how we are biologically and psychologically designed to function as human beings on this planet.
So I'm going to leave you with this final thought as an invitation. Are you ready to drop the armor? Are you ready to break these old survival patterns and actually allow yourself the grace of depending on someone else? Because you are incredibly strong, but you don't have to carry it all alone anymore. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this helped you understand yourself a little better today. Stay curious, and I'll catch you in the next one.